Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome and thanks for logging on. Today we have an unboxing and a review. Richard Paige, who works out of his shop in Hawaii and is a fourth generation watchmaker, sent me his Rpaige Rrocket for a unboxing and review. So I'm going to go through that. And if you're interested in this watch, reach out to me. I'm Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com. I can point you in the right direction, or just search for Rpaige Watch Co. and you'll find his site. Richard's a fourth-generation watchmaker and a serial entrepreneur. He was also the founder of the community site timezone.com, so you might recognize his name from that. I'm happy that the box is rather spare, sufficient to its purpose, but not so bulky that it's going to monopolize your closet or require a safe of its own. Taking a quick look, you have a little manual describing the Vintage Movement series. That's what we've got here. He does make similar-looking watches with modern Unitas-based calibers, but I think he's best known for the Vintage Movement in a wristwatch case, and so that's what I asked for. He sent me the Rrocket with a vintage pocket watch caliber. There's a little foam sleeve, and on the inside of that, a very handsome light brown alligator leather case. You can see it has a little flap, metallic nameplate inside. You pull the watch out on its own little leather travel card, which keeps it secure inside of its pouch. And then you can get a good sense of the watch. It's large. In stainless steel, it's 44 millimeters in diameter. It's actually fairly thin at 13.4. Lug to lug, 54 millimeters from lug tip to lug tip with a broad 20 millimeter spacing between the lugs. It wears essentially like, well, I would compare it to something like a Panerai Luminor in terms of how it fits. It's big, but the movement at nearly 40 millimeters in diameter means that this is probably the minimum size the watch could have been. Now, on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist, it wears quite well. But I do think that if your wrist were much smaller than mine, you'd probably want to seek a smaller timepiece. So the watch fills out my wrist. From over the top, you can see the lugs are out to the edge, and then down the barrel, you get much the same impression. That said, with a sloped crystal, bezel, case flank, and a relatively thin profile, it will slip underneath the cuff, especially if you're the burly type to have a wrist equal in scale to this watch. Your cuff is probably pretty large. The strap is a custom piece, and it's an interesting choice. Ostrich leg leather is what you're seeing here. So it's a sort of reptilian scale pattern, but it's the leg of an ostrich. It's not the conventional quill pattern leather that you often see when ostrich is used. It's a gloss black. You could see in profile, it has a sheer cut side showing the layers of leather, and it is quite robust and stout in that regard. The leather is thick. We have contrasting stitch in a cross-hatched pattern that nicely matches the color of the dial, and then we've got a satinated and polished pin buckle that is Rpaige branded. The case, at first glance, might appear to be a simulacrum of an engraved case, maybe something executed with a laser or a lathe, but this is the real deal. Richard had a limited number of cases freehand engraved with a florisant or floral pattern, sometimes called banknote scrolling, and that's exactly what you've got right here. So these are freehand engraved. No two are going to be exactly alike, and so reach out to him because I know his supply of these is pretty scarce, but if you do want one, well, where there's a will, there's always a way. Now, this is sort of an Art Nouveau motif, whereas the lug profiles, which are tiered, they feel more like a product of the subsequent Art Deco era. So you've got a little bit of Art Deco and Art Nouveau, and then sort of late Victorian on the dial. Taking a look, we have a large Rpaige branded crown. It is a pleasure to wind, but then it's always a pleasure to wind and set any kind of high-grade pocket watch movement. Now, the Lapine pocket watch would have a crown up at 12, whereas a Savonnet has a crown that is at a right angle to the small seconds, and that's what we have right here. We have a Montgomery dial of the style created by Henry S. Montgomery in the late 19th century. Now, a true Montgomery usually includes the numeral 6 inside the small seconds, but this is also regarded as a Montgomery style. And the idea was, while Webster C. Ball gave us the idea of numerals every hour, or if you're looking at the minute scale, every 5 minutes, sometimes trains might be 2, 3, or 4 minutes apart. So it was necessary, in order to avoid railroad disasters, to have a more precise scale on the dial with the individual minutes clearly marked, and so that's the purpose right there. Now, while the hands at center are modern and Luminova, we'll do a quick loom shot so you can get a sense of them. The rest of the dial is true vintage, right down to the original blued steel counterweighted Lancet seconds hand. You can also see that the original dial, with the exception of the Rpaige stamped branding, this is all Elgin, and it's enamel. You can see there's a little bit of fracturing, a little bit of a hairline crack, but it is beautifully preserved given its age. And so as much of the original fabric of the pocket watch, save the case and the original hands, as possible has been used here. And you can see that the enamel, other than the small chip, has really survived quite well. That's the nice thing about enamel. It's sort of glossy, clear, and clean forever as long as it's handled charitably. Now, flip it all over. By the way, we have these lovely cathedral-style hands. You can see the blue and white color scheme of the strap matching the dial. We have a movement that was made in 1917. This is an Elgin Model 2, grade 314. It's just under 40 millimeters in diameter. It has nickel decoration with a damascening across its surface. Note the use of polished screw heads, beautifully polished Mosley-style micrometric regulator. We have solarized crown wheel and ratchet wheel. We also have a solarized click and crown wheel core. We have jewels, pivot jewels, set in chaton cup fixed by screws. Now, in the modern era, this is usually a embellishment that's a nod to the past. You'll see it on a lot of German watches today. But when this watch was made in the early 20th century, in general, the way to fix a jewel precisely into a bridge or a plate was to press it into a precision cup or chaton, and then fix that into the larger structure using screws. That's why you're seeing that right there. Now, the feeling of the wind is outstanding. You can see the watch is 50 meters water resistant, and it is a limited edition. Again, talk to Richard about how many are still available. This 15 jewel movement, which is considered fully jeweled, so fully jeweled but not jeweled to center. It includes a Breguet overcoil hairspring shaped by hand and fired blue to prevent further oxidation. That Breguet coil ensures that with a relatively centered mass, the hairspring will develop concentrically in almost any physical position to counteract the effects of gravity on timing. It's a big slow beating balance, 18,000 vibrations per hour. The mainspring is 35 hours, so you want to wind this at the same time every day. We'll do a little bit more to take a look at this oscillator. You can see that the balance, if you look at the rim carefully, you can see it's two different metals that expand and contract at different rates at different temperatures. Now, the balance is also split so that the split components of it, basically the split semicircles of the circle, can move almost like levers in and out as the two metals expand and contract at different rates as the temperatures change. So the idea is, by varying the expansion and contraction of those metals and breaking the balance up into two freestanding or free articulating semicircles, essentially, they will counteract each other, those two metals, as temperatures drop or rise, which should result in very consistent timekeeping even as temperatures change. And although you can't see it, this is a double roller movement, which is important for shock resistance as well as precision, specifically the alignment of the horns of the escapement anchor with the impulse jewel on the roller table. So a double roller is really what you want to see. If you look carefully, you can see that anchor on its own separate bridge just below. The bevels are in good shape, and the bridges are also in good shape. I might have repolished the screws with a zinc plate or lapping paper and reslotted them with a triangular ruby file, but I do respect Richard's decision to leave all of the scars and marks of wear on the movement and its parts. That sort of preserves its history and its story. Now, in terms of what else you get in the box, there's not a whole lot. It's a very limited packaging, and that includes the booklet. Now, there are two types of Rpaige watches, those that include vintage movements like this one, and those that include modern Unitas-based calibers. So this is relevant to the vintage style movement. You can see a little bit of information about Rpaige and Richard, a little note about winding and setting the time. The most important thing, wind slowly. You will eventually reach the point of resistance. That's when you've got to stop. Continuing on, you can see that this is an antique movement that's 12 size, which is just under 40 millimeters in diameter, and you got a good sense of that. Elgin of Illinois. A lot of people ask, how's it pronounced? Is it Elgin or Elgin? Well, if we were still in Scotland, it would be Elgin, but the folks from Illinois I've spoken to say it is pronounced Elgin, and that is the origin of this movement. Taking a quick look here, Richard's of the opinion that Inca block shock protection and unbreakable mainspring plus anti-magnetic qualities are the only significant modern watchmaking developments. So what he's saying is, for the most part, you're getting a very contemporary and reliable timepiece, even with the vintage movement. Now, I might argue that there have been other significant innovations, a lot of which are related to manufacturing precision and computer-assisted design and lathe milling and electrospark erosion of parts. But in terms of the capabilities of the movement, he's right. There have not been a lot of fundamental changes. 15 joules is considered fully jouled. We saw that just here. And then taking a quick look, a few notes on where this movement actually came from. Continuing through, a little note about 10 meters water resistance. Remember, the watch is actually 50, so just disregard that. Go by what's on the case. You still don't want to take it swimming. In terms of accuracy, there you go. Watch should be accurate to 1 to 2 minutes per day, and I found that high-quality American pocket watch calibers are able to beat that. A little note on warranty. The enamel dial, created by using glass-based or vitreous paint on a copper base, firing it several times. It's easy to destroy enamel in the production process, which is why even to this day it is rare and beautiful. Then finally, a little note about the history of Elgin and Waltham, two movement manufacturers that Richard uses, and some information that is specific to the exact watch you just saw. So again, reach out to Richard Paige, American watchmaker out of Hawaii, Rpaige watches, or you can reach out to me, Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com, and get some more information about how you can get an enamel dial, vintage pocket watch powered, hand engraved cased wristwatch built in the US.